go from there. So thank you everybody for joining us in this EEB Professional Development Workshop. You may or may not know that we have 2 of these every semester, so 2 in the fall and 2 in the spring. And so today's is about graduate school and just a little bit about the whole process so that it's not just this mystery to you, and it can help you think about whether or not you need to go, how to plan for it, and all those kinds of things. In a month's time, October 7th, we'll be doing another workshop on putting together your scientific CV or resume so that you can have a really professional version to share with potential mentors and things like that. The other, in the spring, we'll be having one about careers in EEB, and then we'll also be having another workshop on how to work in a lab for those of you who don't work in a lab already. So we try to offer a fair number of these as best we can, so to help those in our concentration. So if you have ideas for other workshops and things you'd like to learn more about, just please let us know at any time and we can organize these things. So definitely open. So today's, like I said, is about graduate school, and our panel today is Chance. So I'll introduce everyone and then just have them say a few words about what they're studying and so on. And so let me see if, yeah, it doesn't look like Nate is with us, but hopefully he'll join us at some point. So Chance is a graduate student here in EEB. Kendall Beals is a graduate student, and my name is Jen Schweitzer. I'm faculty. So Chance and Kendall, you want to introduce yourselves just briefly and what year you are, what you're studying, and that kind of thing.
Sounds good. I can start.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Chance Knopfsinger, and I grew up in Whitefish, Montana. I completed my bachelor's degree at Montana State University in 2017, and then continued on to a master's degree at MSU as well. I finished that in 2020, and then applied for graduate school here at UTK, and then I'm starting my first year of my PhD program now. My research largely focuses on understanding the diversity and evolution of ectomycorrhizal fungi, and I'm currently working with Dr. Brandon Matheny.
Hey everybody, my name is Kendall Beals. I'm also a grad student, but I just started my 5th year here, so I've been here since 2016. I work with Jen. Actually, I'm one of her grad students, and my research focuses on interactions between microbes in the soil and plants, and how changes to the soil microbiome influence how plants function on the landscape. I got my bachelor's in 2013 from Dickinson College, and then I took a few years to work as a lab technician on various projects to kind of figure out what I wanted to actually study for grad school, and that led me to here in 2016.
Great. Okay, looks like Nate hasn't joined us yet, so so we'll move on. Get this going. So the reason why we do all of these, why we do these workshops is so that you guys don't get to the day after graduation and say, "Ooh, now what do I do?" And so we try to provide as much background and help as we can. And so I guess I'd like for us to start by just opening it up a little bit just to conversation. You know, for you guys who are here, do you think you need a graduate degree to reach your career goals? Do you know anything about the process already? What excites you or worries you about grad school? And you can put this in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and talk to us and tell us. There's not very many of us, so we can all so we can just have a chat. So you can unmute yourself and if you want to address any of these questions, you know, what do you know about it? You know, what are you excited about, or what are you concerned about thinking about grad school? And then we'll go on to talk about some other specifics things. Oh, Nate's here.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I looked down. I was like, oh no, 5 minutes.
Oh, that's all right. We were just doing introductions. So if you just want to introduce yourself briefly and what year you are and what you're studying and that kind of thing, that'd be great.
Cool. Yeah, I'm Nate Gibson. I am a second-year PhD student in the Blum Lab. So Michael Blum is my advisor. And in there, I study the social ecological dynamics of infectious disease. and urban ecology. So we're looking at questions of how post-disaster cities, kind of like New Orleans, how those landscapes interact with infectious disease prevalence, and how recovery strategies like green infrastructure, so rain gardens and bioswales, might interact with vector populations and therefore change risks of infectious disease.
Great. This is good. So the panel is has a broad range of experience here. So there are folks who are fairly new into the program, and folks who are further along, so they can answer all kinds of questions for you. So back to this, what are the things that are on your guys' mind? The undergrads who are attending today, if you feel like sharing anything. Do you know anything about the process so far? Have you looked into it or done any research about what grad school is all about?
One thing that's been on my mind lately is thinking about people I would want to have as my advisors in grad school, and kind of how to go about getting in touch with them, finding them. Yeah, I think that's kind of one thing I've been thinking about.
Okay, great. We'll be touching on that today.
Cool.
With some details. So, any others? Corey or Drew or Madison, do you have any other thoughts or concerns or things you want to ask? And Corey says he's a little worried. It's going to be hard to fund grads to fund grad school, and so that's a real concern, and that we'll talk a lot about because for a lot of graduate programs, at least in ecology and evolution, there are tuition waivers, and you get paid to actually go to graduate school, and we'll talk about some of those details. And so it's definitely a question, that lots of people have, that everybody should have, how do I do this? How can I afford this? And is it, but the good news is that you should not have to go into debt to go to graduate school. And I'll explain what I mean by that as we get to that section. So. Any other questions or thoughts?
I've also kind of been thinking about how much of my research I need to know already or have an idea of already in order to I guess pursue the faculty members and programs and things like that. How prepared do I need to come in to the program?
So what kind of background do you need to have and that kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, those are all great questions, and we are going to be talking about all of that stuff today. So we'll move on through a couple of slides where we'll hit sort of 4 key questions, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Graduate students, please chime in at any time, and then if undergrads, if you have questions or follow-up questions about any of the things that we're talking about, just please pipe up and either in the chat room or just unmuting yourself, and we'll just make it a good conversation. So sound okay to everyone? Okay, great. So the first thing I guess I always like to start with is just sort of thinking a little bit about, because you might not even know that much of information just about what's out there, what kind of degrees do you actually go for, in ecology and evolution. And so there are multiple different types of graduate programs. And so there are master's degrees that are only coursework. There are master's degrees that are coursework and a full-time project, a master's thesis that's research-based. Chance, was your master's a coursework only or a thesis-based master's?
It was both. It had the coursework and a thesis.
Okay. But there are some programs that are just coursework where you don't have to do research at all. And so I was just curious, what you had done. I did a master's too that was a thesis-based project. And so I did take courses because it's usually, 24 to 26 hours or so. It depends based on projects, depending on the program. But then there's also a research project if you're thinking about a particular type of graduate experience or background. And so some jobs actually require, a thesis-based master's, and some jobs require, just a coursework master's is fine. And so there is a difference between those in case you didn't know that already. And And then there's a PhD that's both, or the PhD programs that are coursework based and the writing and presentation of a research project and a thesis. And so that should probably just be the focus of a PhD. That's usually longer. It usually takes for a master's program anywhere between 2 to 3 years, and a PhD program can last, depending if you have a master's already, can last anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6, years, depending on whether it's field-based, how well things go. There are a lot of variables that that play into that. But usually a master's degree is shorter, and it sort of gets your foot in the door, with classwork and with research, and then you can, if you're interested in a PhD, then you can move on to that if it's required or something that you want to do. There are direct entry PhD programs, so you don't have to do a master's first. Here at UT, a lot of our programs here can be direct entry PhD directly from an undergraduate experience, and so from having your bachelor's degree. So.
Yeah, I can say I did not get I took a year off, but I did not get a master's degree before coming here to do my PhD. So don't think that it's a necessary step.
Yeah.
That you have to go from bachelor's to master's to PhD. It's about what your experience is.
I also, I started here actually as a master's student. So I came in as a master's student for Gen, and then I actually, I liked it so much that I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna upgrade to a PhD. So I actually transitioned right within my graduate degree here. So there's a lot of, just going off what Nate said, there's a lot of different paths that you can take.
Absolutely. So, great. So the things that we're going to talk about today are specifically about, do I need to go to graduate school? What do I need to do while I'm an undergraduate? How do you identify an advisor in a lab where you'd like to work? And then how do you apply? And yes, that's almost a year ahead. So if you wanted to if you're going to be graduating in May and you have the intention of starting graduate school in August or September of 21, that means you have to be doing your homework this fall and applying this fall for next fall. And so it is a lengthy process. And so we'll go through these kinds of things, and then we'll have a kind of Q&A at the end for other questions that you guys have, and then have Nate and Chance and Kendall tell you a little bit more about just what their daily life is like as a graduate student, and things they wish they'd known, before they applied, or when they were in your shoes as an undergraduate considering grad school. So first thing is, do you need to go? That's not a small question, is figuring out, do I need a master's degree, or do I need a PhD to do the work that I want to do, or to pursue the career that I'm interested in? And so this takes a lot of thought, of really, what career is going to make me happy? What are the kinds of things that I want to do? And does that career require it? And so for some careers, you can do them with an undergraduate degree, and that's the terminal degree. For some careers and some jobs, a master's degree is the terminal degree, which means that's all you need to move forward. And then for some careers, a PhD is required. And so what I like to advise students to do is to sort of look at a lot of the these job boards that are out there. So this one's through the Ecological Society of America. This one is a conservation job board. This is, so there are a lot of these about sort of ecological, and these span the range from state and federal and graduate, and post-grad types of jobs, and sort of everything in between. And it's kind of fun to look out there, if you're still even figuring out, what kind of career are you really trying to be moving towards as a goal. It's fun to sort of look into the future a little bit and say, well, what jobs are out there? And then that helps you think about, then look to see what kinds of requirements they have. Do they require a master's? Do they require a PhD? And that sort of thing. Yes, this PowerPoint will be emailed to you, and some other documents that go along with this. So you don't have to take notes, and you can access all these websites. So
I would just say Conservation Job Board is an awesome place to research jobs. There's so many cool opportunities, and even calls for master's and doctoral students as well. So it's not only jobs. You can also be able to peruse what people are looking for in a grad student.
Great, and that's this one here, Conservation Job Board. Yeah. So that's one way, is to first think about and really do your homework and do your research to think, does the career or the job that I'm interested in, does it require it? Do I need to have a master's or a PhD? And a lot of times, it's easy to just sort of have some conversations, talk to your professors, your graduate um, teaching assistants in your classes, your advisors or mentors, and ask them, what helped them make the decision that they wanted to go to graduate school, and how did they choose, where they wanted to go, and all of those kinds of things. And so talk to folks and talk to as many people as you can, because you'll get a broad range of perspectives, and you'll learn that that there's no single one path, as we've said, to getting, to a career or to getting into a graduate program. And then there are lots of great blogs out there and lots of other great resources like this one, The Professor is In and Getting What You Came For. Professor is In is a blog, and Getting What You Came For is a great book. It's a little older now, but it still has a lot of really great information. So grad students, would you advise what other things would you advise, for making the decision of if you even need to go to grad school?
For me, so my ultimate career goals, I want to be a soil scientist that works on ecosystem restoration. So I did take a lot of time to actually think about, do I need to go to grad school? And ultimately, what made me say yes to that question was thinking about kind of what skill set do I want to have. I would like to direct research in my career, in my future job. So I know that if I want to be able to direct research, I have to really be fluent in research. And so that was kind of, I think, the turning point for me that made me decide that I wanted to go to grad school.
Yeah, I think very similar. That first question is really, really important, because you need that motivation, or that goal that you want to reach, to be able to know what steps you need to take. And for me, it was identifying that, like, public policy and decision makers can have, these impacts on ecosystems and environments, even just in cities, that they don't always understand. And for me, it was getting a seat at that table from the scientific side really requires having that level of expertise of, a PhD, for them to listen to you and respect your opinion and say, okay, this person might know something that we could listen to and incorporate and develop better policy and help our people more. So that was where I came at it from, of saying, what do I really need to get that seat at the table? Is it a PhD? Most likely. So that's how I decided where I needed to go.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and my experiences are similar to Kendall's. As an undergraduate, I wanted to be a scientist, and I don't know that I exactly knew what that meant at the time, but I was interested in directing my own research and having control over that. And I also have broad interest in teaching, especially at the university or college level. And so a lot of those things are going to require high-level graduate degrees.
Yeah. It can't be overstated how important it is just to really put the time into to think about yourself and what's going to make you happy, and what kind of job, your flexibility and freedom and all of those things mean to you. And so got to put in that time, of thinking, and doing your homework, about what jobs are out there and which ones can you see yourself doing. I guess I wanted to show you next, just a little bit about, what kinds of jobs you can get, with a grad degree. Are you guys seeing this this chat box while it's on the screen? Is it over the slides?
Not covering anything.
Okay, great. Okay, so, and I thought the easiest way to do that might be to show you some of the recent graduates over the last few years from EEB's program. And so over the last 5 years or so, we've had 53 graduates from master's program with master's degrees and 111 PhDs. And so you just sort of follow this, to see where they go. So non-tenure track or university position. Some of our master students go to government job. That's the largest. 28 of those 53 go to into government at the state and federal level. Some do go into graduate school and then on to postdocs. Some go into other businesses, whether they're nonprofits or for-profit types of consulting businesses. NGOs, they go on to further education, secondary school teachers, and so on. Our PhD graduates, a lot of them go on to tenure track faculty. So they, like Chance, they're interested in thinking about teaching at the university level. And so a lot of our graduates do that and get go for a postdoc first and then end up in tenure track faculty or non-tenure track or other positions. A fair number of them do go into government positions and then again into business and so on. So with a grad degree in ecology and evolution, you've got a lot of options here. I mean, this is a broad spread of different types of jobs. And even though they're really general categories here, should give you some idea, you know, that there are lots of different directions you can go to with a background in ecology and evolution at the graduate level. So I kind of poll folks when I talk to seminar speakers and other folks, you know, of why did you go to graduate school and what did you get from it? And this is kind of a list that has come up over time. You know, that you need a terminal degree for the career that you're interested in. You know, maybe that having that graduate degree puts you in a higher pay bracket, so you can have greater earnings and lifetime earnings. It advances your career opportunities, and whether you can advance, you know, in a particular field or area or not. Just enhancing your education, you know, for your own edification. It allows you to advance particular projects that you're interested in, teaches you how to be your own boss. Sometimes there are employer incentives, you know, for going to grad school and getting a master's degree or a PhD. And then for a lot of folks, it gives you a real experience in teaching and mentoring. But some of the other things is it really allows you to sort of follow your interests. You know, it allows you to realize the things that you've been interested in and that you're concerned about and that you want to work towards. And just because it's something that you want to do, you know, because it's fun and you're interested in that. Other reasons are there's a lot of flexibility in graduate school. As long as you get your work done, you know, you can, your time is your own in a lot of ways outside of your specific courses that you're taking or that you're teaching. And in the end, you know, you make some lifelong friendships and relationships. I mean, I graduated from my PhD in 2002, and I still am incredibly close to the folks in my cohort. You know, we do family trips together. We collaborate on research and all kinds of things. And so those are a few reasons that I've come up with, you know, for why you should go to grad school. What else would you guys add? Kendall, Chance, and Nate.
I guess I can offer a bit of an anecdote to kind of flesh out what advanced career opportunities means. When I was working in New Orleans after I graduated, I was working with a colleague of mine who only has a master's degree, but he's an incredible field ecologist. He's been worked in everything from the Everglades to the bayous in Louisiana for like 20 or 30 years. He could identify every single plant that we ever needed. But he would kind of lament the fact that he only ever had a master's degree and he had all this data that could be a PhD, but just kind of never found that proper time. And now he's, I think, close to 50, and he's like, do I go back to graduate school now? And he pointed out one time that he was working with people that he mentored when he was a grad student or you know, a lab manager on campus, who now have their own PhDs and are, you know, leading their own institutions or having teaching jobs. And he was like, man, that's crazy, because I taught them, you know, how to do field ecology. And so that thinking pretty far down the road of what you want your goals to be can really help map out what you need to do and what graduate school can do for you.
I think something that I found along the way that I've learned about this process is that the whole point of doing research is you're creating knowledge, right? Much of your dissertation is creating new information that has not been known before. And it's a really empowering feeling. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it. I mean, there's a lot of days where it's really hard. Yesterday, for example, even though like I got a decent amount of writing done, I was just in kind of like a mental cloud sort of, but today was like a lot better. So there's definitely, I think, waves that we all have of feeling. Some days you're like, you're on top of the world. And then other days you're just like, oh, this is just not feeling it today. But at the end of the day, you're working towards creating new knowledge, which is so satisfying, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the one thing that has resonated with me is that I really enjoy what I do. I love doing research on fungi, and that's what I wanted, a career that I could be engaged in every day and enjoy what I'm doing and get paid for that. And not only do you feel empowered when you get to create new knowledge, but then you're just enjoying life. And that's definitely something that's really important to me as well.
Absolutely. And that can't be underestimated or overestimated how important that is, because it is fun to be creating new knowledge. And yeah, it's amazing. So the flip side of this, of course, is then reasons not to go to grad school. It can be competitive, to get in. It does require a lot of independence. You're the transition from being an undergrad where you're always answering to someone else to graduate school where you're self-motivating. This knowledge that you're generating, and so you have to be an independent thinker. There's no necessarily a guarantee of a higher salary, and some careers don't require it. Sometimes you might get into a program that isn't a place where you really want to live or be. And then sometimes, you can get that advanced degree and it's not really necessary. And so that's why really doing your homework first to see if you need to go to grad school is such an important thing. Things to think about are that it's anywhere from a 2 to a 7 year time commitment. So it's not a small bit of your life, but it's if it's something that does motivate you, it's definitely worth it. Because it is such an independent endeavor, it can be stressful, because you're relying on yourself. And so there are a lot of things that can interfere, with making it be a hard experience. A thesis and a dissertation are hard to write. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of effort to think about creating a good experimental design, analyzing the data, interpreting it, putting it in the context of the literature, and then getting it published. All that takes a lot of work, and that so it requires a lot of support, from family and friends. And it can be expensive, but most programs, there is support, that's offered, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And there is a toll, to taking it, as I said, because it can be stressful, and grad students, do experience, higher than the average population for their age group, depression and anxiety, because it is such a hard process. So that shouldn't deter you from doing it, but it just means that you have to take good care of yourself, and you have to make sure you exercise and that you have good support systems and you take care of yourself in all kinds of ways. And so anything you guys would add to the why you wouldn't necessarily, and I'm not saying none of these things would necessarily make you change your mind about going to graduate school, but there are things to just be aware of.
I think for me, and others can chime in about this if they like, but it definitely, pursuing graduate research, in my opinion, definitely requires you to know yourself pretty well, or be willing to explore, all parts of yourself, know what gets you stressed out, how do you deal with stress, all those sorts of things I think really help, because it's easy, especially when you're an independent worker, to kind of procrastinate or let things kind of build up, and being able to just be comfortable with exploring how you work is really useful. The Counseling Center at UT is a great resource, and a lot of institutions have free counseling. There's a lot of life that happens during grad school, not just your research, but just you grow up a lot. And so being able to, I think, work through, just your personal life as well, just know that you're still a whole person. You're not just a scientist, but you're a human. So being comfortable with, just experiencing everything that happens and learning how to deal with it.
I think a thing that might fit in that box with stressful and requires family support is it will also, put some stress on your personal relationships. It requires an incredible amount of time. So like for me, for example, I'm incredibly lucky that I have a partner who is so supportive of me, who was able to find a job in the same city as me in her field. And that can definitely weigh into your calculus if you're in a long-term relationship, and you're making a 2 to 7 year time commitment. That's something that you'll probably have to talk over with your partner if that needs to. So that's just something that can be added into the calculus that might make it a little difficult of, do I go to grad school or not? Is it the right time or not?
I think that's a great point that Nate brought up. And not only does graduate school put stress on your relationships, but some of the directions your career will go after that can do the same thing, whether it's a postdoc and moving around like all over the country, or if it's the pressure required or the commitment required in academic positions. Like those things all put stress on your relationships. And the other important note on this slide is that you do complete the degree by yourself, but you should definitely have support. And that will be hopefully from your family and friends, but also from your peers in your program, and then definitely from your advisor and many of the other professors in the department. So don't ever think that you are going to have to do all this on your own, because you will have a lot of resources, and it's important that you lean on them.
Great points. Thank you all for adding that. So then, if you're thinking about it, at your stage, you guys might, are you juniors or seniors or some combination? I'll make that assumption. Yeah, juniors. Okay. Somewhere. Okay. So there are some things, that can really help you, that you can still do, even if you're, a senior, there are things that you can do to help, prepare yourself and guide yourself, so working in a lab is a great way to gain some experience and sort of try on that research hat to see if you like it, and to see if if this is an area that it excites you, that you're interested in. And so working in a lab is a great way to try to figure out some of those things. Find yourself a mentor, right now, whether it's through the graduate student mentoring program here in EEB. So this email here is a link, and EEB has a really successful and fantastic undergraduate and graduate mentoring program where you submit some information of your interests and your background. And then you're paired as an undergraduate with a graduate student who has similar interests or backgrounds. And so then you have somebody who's pretty close in your age, or just a few years maybe, ahead of you, who can give you some really good advice and help you think through some of those things. And so, and having a mentor like that is just invaluable, having somebody that you can bounce ideas off of. And so it can be a graduate student, it can be your faculty advisor, or it could be someone that you had just a good rapport with, from one of your classes, a faculty member. So don't be afraid to reach out to some of those, to folks that you felt like you could talk to, because that really makes a big difference. And those folks also can serve as feature letter writers, who can, and we'll get to this when we talk about what's required to apply for graduate school, but you have to have people write letters for you, and the letter writers are really important, that viewpoint that says, yes, I know this person, and I see great potential in them, and I know they work hard. That goes a long way, to getting you into a graduate program. Some programs still require the GRE. EEB, for example, doesn't, and a lot of programs are sort of getting away from it just because it's not we like most standardized tests, they aren't really a good measure, of what someone's capable of in graduate school, because so much of it is self-motivation and creativity. And so GRE doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily positively correlated with how successful a graduate student will be. And so, but some programs still require it. And so you need to look into it closely to see if you're looking at a particular program at a particular school, if they do require it. And if so, then you have to take that. As an undergrad, you can start sort of narrowing down, that general area of interest. What are you most excited about? Because that'll help you really narrow down a list of potential advisors. And so, are you most interested in botany? Are you most interested in plant ecology? Are you most interested in pollinator interactions? Are you interested in, so you have to sort of fine tune, where are your interests, and then that'll help you start doing some research to figure out who some of those potential advisors might be. And then you need to have a resume or CV or some sort of written narrative of why you want to go to grad school, and your short and sort of your long-term goals. And so those are all kinds of things that a potential advisor, so you reach out to someone, they're going to say, well, why do you want this degree? What's your background? What are your goals? And that'll help them figure out whether or not you're a good fit, for their lab. And that's why we offer, these other workshops like CVs and how to get into a lab and, doing all those kinds of things. Any other things that you guys did as undergrads that you would recommend to these folks about, what helped you fine tune, your thoughts about grad school, or things that helped you figure out your area or focal interests?
Yeah, I would say, lab experience is great, but, don't feel like the first lab that you work in is like the system that you need to keep working in.
Mm.
It can give you the chance to see, maybe this is something I like or I don't like. Like for me, for example, my first ever lab job was actually in Dr. Derryberry's lab when she was still at Tulane, which is completely different from what I do now. But it was still that first time that I got to do like real science, But it also made me realize, like, analyzing songs wasn't, my forte. I didn't. And then the next time I got a job was in Dr. Blum's lab, and I was out in the field, trapping rats and doing this disease ecology work. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is really what I like. But I wouldn't have ever got that opportunity if I didn't, take that first step and just go and get in the lab and get a little experience and, start to build a bit of a network. So take any opportunities you can to get lab experience, because it might help you find out what you like to do. And even if you don't like it, it's still experience that you can add to a CV. It still lets people know that you're developing skills and that you bring something to the table.
Excellent point. Yep.
Yeah, my experience was similar to Nate's. The first lab I worked in, I found out what I don't want to do in research, and that drove me to refine my interests. And then I eventually found a research lab as an undergraduate that I enjoyed. It was studying mycology and fungi, and then that led to my master's program and me finding a mentor and to building those skills. So those things are very important.
Yep, I would just echo kind of Chance and Nate in that the first lab that I worked in after my undergrad was a ecophysiology lab. So I was kind of a field intern, and I was just basically collecting field samples for the technicians and the grad students that were actually doing the work, and realized that I wasn't super interested in that kind of work, and then moved to work with a tropical ecology lab because I had done a little bit of tropical stuff for my undergrad. And I was doing stuff that's totally different from what I'm doing now. I was doing like transect surveys, looking for animals, and thought that I was going to be interested in it, but that didn't really stick. And then I just kind of, my spare time, I was reading some papers and things on kind of microbial ecology and how fungi interact with plants, and started noticing fungi all around our field sites and was super interested in that. So that's kind of how it got me to here, because I just had some, moments that were just kind of periphery moments that seemed like it at the time, but that ended up being really influential. So I think, it's important to just kind of test out your curiosity with stuff. Just because you're not interested in one aspect of research doesn't mean that it's not for you.
Yeah, it's a great point. So you guys have any questions as we're moving through this? Feel free to raise your hands or put anything in the chat. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about, this is a question that a couple of you had, how do you identify an advisor in a lab, and so finding out, what your interests are, as folks have been saying, is so important, because you need to figure out, what you like and what is exciting to you, and what are the things that the areas that you can really just see yourself doing, for an extended period of time or your entire, working career. And so, so you have to take some time to figure that out, and so the fall before you want to start grad school, sort of identify the subject areas if you haven't already identified those things. And, one way to think about it is, what have been your favorite classes, and within those classes, what have been the favorite subjects, topics, within those classes. And that can help you start really narrowing it down. And then you can start reading some more papers, as Kendall suggested, and starting to think, what are the things that you think that just kind of turn you on in interesting ways. And so once you can identify those things, then you can start narrowing down that list of potential advisors and sending out emails saying you're interested in their lab. You can send their CVs and your goal statement if they show any interest, and sometimes you have to email a few times, I would recommend that you find 5 or 6 people, you know, whose work you're interested in, and you can talk to other graduate students, you can talk to your faculty advisor or your graduate student mentor, you know, and they can sometimes come up with suggestions. You know, if you're interested in plant soil interactions, who are some people that do that kind of work, you know, and that might have openings, you know, that you might be interested in. So people can help you find potential advisors. But if you're doing your homework and you're reading papers, then you'll start noticing some patterns that, you know, I keep seeing this person's name a lot. They must be doing a lot of really interesting work that's of interest to me. And then that can help you find, you know, that list of potential advisors. And so then you could just start sending out some emails, and you know, and they can just be really polite things that say, hey, you know, dear Dr. So-and-so, you know, I've been reading, you know, a little bit of your work and I'm really interested in it. I really liked, you know, this paper, you know, boom, boom, boom. These are my experiences. And I was curious if you are accepting graduate students, you know, in the next year. You know, I'm happy to provide, you know, some more information if you have time. So sometimes they might not respond, you know, immediately, but keep knocking on the door. You know, sometimes if someone writes me, sometimes I might miss an email because I get a lot of emails. But if someone writes me 2 times, then I'll say, they really are interested, you know, and I should try to get back to them, you know, as quickly, you know, as possible. And so then you can just start a conversation, you know, with that potential mentor. It could be through email. You can have phone conversations, Zoom conversations, in person if it's possible, you know, which allows you to start talking about fellowships and other and all kinds of things, you know, in their lab. And then once you start establishing a relationship with somebody, then you should definitely, you know, email their current and their past lab members to learn more about their mentoring style, you know, what grad student culture is like in the lab, what life in the city is like, and all those kinds of things. And so how did you guys identify the advisor, you know, that you wanted to work with, that you ended up working with? If you don't mind sharing.
I probably took what is seen as like the odd path, in that I stuck with my advisor that I had in my undergraduate lab after he moved up to University of Tennessee. So I was an undergraduate at Tulane University down in New Orleans, where Dr. Blum and his wife, Dr. Derryberry, both taught. And going into my senior year, they both moved up to Tennessee. And I'd worked in Dr. Blum's lab and sort of kept in touch with him and kept working with colleagues of his that were still at the university. So we just sort of always had this kind of like open line of communication going back and forth. And so we had discussed graduate school, you know, touched on the topic here or there, you know, what does it look like, things like that. And then finally, when I got sort of serious about it, I want to go to graduate school, he, of course, was like the first person I reached out to. And it was just immediately like, yeah, I've got a room, you know, in my lab. Things got more serious about like, what would that look like? What year can I apply? You know, at GRFP and things like that. And so UT was the only school I applied to because I just had such a strong connection with Dr. Blum that I was like, I you know, looked around a little bit, but I was like, this is, you know, my mentor and my advisor. So this is who I'm going to stick with. That's also, you know, apparently I've come to find out not very common for people just to stick with their undergraduate lab advisor or things of that nature. So that was really, I kind of lucked into a great situation, and I'm very appreciative of that.
It does happen though. It's not that unusual, you know, for folks to just have a great relationship and to have, you know, just gotten really excited about a topic and said, well, why would I want to go to somewhere else? You know, this is a lab where I need to be.
So for me, for my master's degree, I worked in my advisor's lab as an undergraduate, and then that led to the master's program, like I mentioned. But for the PhD program here at UT, because I was originally from Montana, this is a long ways from home, one thing that Jen mentioned is that you need to refine your interests. And once you do that, a great next step is to try to attend like academic conferences. There's going to be a lot of people there that share interests with you. There's going to be a lot of casual situations where you can talk to these people in person. And that's what I did. That's how I met Brandon Matheny, was at the Mycological Society of America conference. And that was last summer. It was July of 2019. And that's where I started our conversation. And then that led to corresponding through email and on Skype, and then refining the application and then moving forward like that. And I had also read a lot about his work and knew what he was doing. And so I had a strong interest in him as well.
So I have a little bit different of a story. I went to a small liberal arts school where there were no grad students, so there's not a whole lot of rigorous research that goes on. It's more focused on teaching. So my undergrad advisor, who I had a really great connection with, but he was in a totally different field than what I was interested in. So that's why I kind of decided to take a few years after undergrad to just work in some labs to figure out what I was really interested in. And someone that I met while I was working in one of these labs as a field intern, she had actually mentioned kind of the research that she had done as an undergrad here at UT. And I was like, oh, that sounds like really interesting. It's like tangential to kind of my research interests. And so I ended up reaching out to that faculty member that she had worked with. And then she actually told me, hey, I'm actually moving. I'm not going to be at UT anymore, but there are some other faculty in the department that are kind of similar to the stuff that I work on. And one of those people is Jen. And so I reached out to Jen after I kind of read some of her papers and had no idea what plant soil feedbacks were. That was the first time that I'd heard about them when I read those papers, but was really interested in it. And then we started emailing and we had some conversations also over the phone. So yeah, I didn't work as in a research lab as an undergrad, but I just got, oh, that's my dog. So I'll stop talking. Yeah.
I would also add, just for that last point, emailing current and past members, I've probably had 2 Zooms already of prospective students for Mike's lab reach out to me. I've had several more reach out by email throughout the time. And that just also, like, it really does indicate to your potential advisor that you're really, like, serious about it, right? That you want to know what you're getting yourself into, that you're doing your due diligence. So it's more than just finding out. For you, it also is a good show. Like, it shows that you're serious. It shows that you want to, that you're doing your homework.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think talking to a lot of current students and previous students of either, you know, that advisor, but also just people in the department really helps. I learned a lot about our department just from the interview process, but I also learned a lot about grad school from grad students when I was a technician working with them. So just learning about all the different kind of options out there and people's experiences.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, let's talk quickly about about just the nuts and bolts of how you do it. You know, applying for graduate school, and then we'll get to the Q&A and hear from these guys. You know, specifically about what they wish they'd known and that kind of stuff. And so, generally, you know, when you apply to a program, you're working to apply with a person. You know, so you don't just choose a school and put in an application there. You're applying to work at a person. Or with the person, you know, at a particular school. And so that's why it's important to narrow down your interests so that you can identify a potential mentor, you know, early on, because then that person is going to advocate for you in this whole process, as because there are only a limited number of positions, you know, in most programs. And so they're going to be an advocate for you and sort of say, yes, this person is great. I can see them in my lab and we have a lot in common and I think it'll be great. And so that's why you have to reach out to that person and not just to the school. If you just apply to a program, your chance of getting in is probably really, really small. That's why you want to have a connection with someone and actually somebody identified that you want to work with. A lot of programs, including here at EEB, there's a graduate recruitment weekend. And so you'll want to meet with the faculty and grad students and talk in depth with a potential mentor. And if they do offer a graduate recruitment weekend, you should definitely go to it, whether it's in person or virtual one over the next year or so. Because it just gives you a chance to really ask questions and figure out if it's the right place for you, if it's the right culture, you know, if the lab is the right place for you. And so it's just the more conversations you have, the better. And so generally how the process works is that you apply sometime in, and it's usually somewhere between December and January are generally the time periods of when applications are due to start in the following August. And so that's why now is a good time to be reaching out and doing your homework and reaching out to potential mentors and that sort of thing. Because you do that over the fall, then you can put together, your application in December or January, depending on when the deadline is. And then most decisions and offers are usually mailed or are decided by March or April. April 15th is the last day. It's just a consortium thing that all graduate schools make that decision by April 15th. But I will say that applying to a particular person to work with a particular person is an EEB model. So there are other departments that have other models that don't work like this. And so if you were going for a non-thesis master's program that's coursework, then you don't need a specific mentor. And so it just depends on the specific program that you're interested in. A couple of things that are really important to know and that you might not know much about just yet is that just the financial aspects of graduate school. And so for most programs, you'll come in either on a graduate teaching assistantship or a graduate research assistantship. And so if you're on a GTA, you'll be a graduate student who is teaching and it pays you a salary to teach. And so you've all had TAs, for your intro bio courses and even some of your upper division courses. And that graduate student is getting paid to teach about 20 hours a week while they're also doing their research. And so that generally when if you're accepted into a program, that GTA will be offered and available the whole length of your graduate program. And so, for example, here at UT, if we accept the students, we guarantee them funding as a GTA for 5 years. Other models, if you are called graduate research fellowships or graduate research assistants, in which there are fellowships that pay you to do research. And so there are these NSF fellowships through USDA, through DOE. Your advisor might have a grant that had a GRA fellowship, for a graduate student. And so you want to find out that kind of information, how you're going to get paid. And if you just find a graduate program that doesn't pay you to do research, in some form or fashion, I think you need to find another program. There are some that can be really expensive, but it's not common. And so going to graduate school on a GTA or GRA is the most common way of doing that. Find out if there's health insurance, if there's tuition waivers, fee waivers, and if other fees that are available at that department. Some of the common requirements, and so most programs have a minimum GPA. So for example, here in EEB, it's a 3.0. That's just a bare minimum. Sometimes they can go lower and you can get in if you have a lower GPA. It's all just dependent upon the program. It's dependent upon your potential and all those kinds of things. Life happens, as an undergrad, and sometimes it's not a very good predictor, just like the GREs, of how successful a student is going to be as a graduate student. So aware departments, that's not as big a deal. You have to write some kind of personal statement, what your goals are and why graduate school is going to help you get there. Sometimes they require the GRE, as we said, and then having those letters of recommendation. So the other info that you'll be asked on an application is who is your potential mentor, because they're going to want to know a name. They're going to know if you've applied or are eligible to apply for different fellowships and scholarships and honors that are available in the department. And so most programs will have a web page that describes all of those things, and they'll want to know like I said, your professional goals, if you've had any research experience in the past, and if so, what was it? And then if you've had any kind of publications, that have resulted from that research. Often the application process is kind of a two-step. So here in EEB, for example, you apply to the graduate school, and then there's a separate application, for the department. And there are generally fees, that for these applications. You can request, that those fees be waived if you for reasons. And then we sort of, recommend that you apply to multiple programs so that you can maximize your opportunities. Nate applied with Dr. Blum because he knew that was where he really wanted to go. And sometimes that works out, often that does, but you want to have choices, and you want to have options. And so doing that is by applying to multiple programs can allow you to do that. and it's sometimes a long process, you know, so you need to start it as early as you can and figure out, you know, those kinds of things as early as you can. So I'm going to stop the share so that you guys can ask particular questions, and then we can let these guys talk specifically about what's grad school like and how does it differ from undergrads. It is 5 o'clock, but if you could hang out around for another 10 minutes, you know, that'd be great. If you want to ask some questions, or if you just want to post them on the chat board, then we can have these guys answer them, address these questions, and then we'll send you this recording so that you can listen to it. So what questions do you have after going through all of that information and hearing, you know, different folks' perspectives? What other things can we tell you about, and what life is like, or specific questions that you have? While you're thinking about that, do you guys want to tell us, graduate students, a little bit, you know, about things, just one or two things that you wish you'd known, you know, before you applied and before you got into this whole process? Because sometimes we don't even know the questions we need to be asking, you know.
Well, I think Alex had a question early on about like how prepared in terms of knowledge do you need to be going into grad school? That's something that I worried about too. It was like, well, what if don't have all the like smarts that I need to before I start this process? But you gain some of that. I mean, there's a variety of ways you can do that. I just started reading papers that Jen had published and that other people had published, and that kind of got me introduced a little bit to the language. I didn't understand all of them, but at least got familiar with kind of the content. But then I've also found, like, I wish I knew that, you know, don't worry so much about the knowledge, you know, that you have going in, because you learn that in grad school. I mean, that's the whole process of it. You know, if I compare what I know now compared to what I knew then, I mean, it's a huge difference. And, you know, I think the important thing to remember is just, you know, learning it's a process. You know, the important thing is just that you are curious, I think, to answer those questions or to find out that knowledge. That's what it's about. It's not about coming in with all of this knowledge. I mean, yes, it helps if you have some lab skills and stuff like that, but I learned a bunch of lab skills here, and I learned all of my coding skills and my bioinformatics skills here. So it's just coming in with a curiosity to like, oh, I'll try this, is what's really important, I think.
Yeah, just to build on that, you sometimes don't know what skills you need until you get to grad school and you get into identifying your research questions and what's going to take to write your thesis or your dissertation. And even then, you don't need all of them, because collaboration is going to be something that follows you throughout your time, whether you're in grad school or in academia or outside of it. There's always going to be someone who can do something and is really, really good at it. So you don't need to be good at everything. Like, you need to identify, what in my field or in my research do I need to develop, and then develop that really well. If it's a certain statistical skill set, go all in on that. If it's, you know, in the lab and you need to be the best at PCR and DNA extraction, you know, do that. But don't feel the need to have knowledge of everything and everything to do with your system. You can just know your limits and know what you need to know most. And then from there, it feels a lot more like accomplishable. It doesn't seem as much of a daunting a task once you break it down a little bit and say, oh no, I just need to take this stats class, and then I'll be able to do these tests and, you know, make this pretty graph in R, and all of a sudden you're a scientist and you're writing a paper, right? You don't do it all at once.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Corey wanted to know, is it more typical to be a GTA or a GRA? Grant monies and fellowships are not that easy to come by necessarily, particularly when you're first starting out. Once you get a little bit of experience, you know, they become a little easier. But most students come in as GTAs, at least in this department, you know, and in other departments I've been involved in, 3/4 of the students, you know, are teaching assistants, not on their own fellowships.
I would also love to add that there is a trade-off between them. You know, when you're a GTA, there's obviously the time associated with teaching. I'm a GTA as well, as Kendall she's a GTA. When you're on a fellowship, you're then beholden to your advisor for that research that they're doing for that grant, right? And it becomes very defined what the work you're doing. And you pretty much, have to stick to that unless you don't want that security of being on the fellowship and not having to teach and, just doing research. So there's those trade-offs that you can balance when you get there of, if there's something you really want to do and it's outside the scope of the fellowship, then it becomes a lot harder to work that into your research because the fellowship is why you're there.
And teaching is part of your training. If you're interested in being an instructor at any level, at the community college or high school or at the university level, then you need to practice. You have to, and teaching gives you, helps you really get that experience in teaching, but it also reinforces that knowledge. And so it has a lot of really good benefits.
One of just the, a potential downside of the teaching, even though we're all GTAs here, is that it does take up time. So thankfully, it's not very common, I think, for us to hit that like 20-hour maximum, which is great because that would be about half of our work week. But I probably put in, I don't know, definitely under 10 hours a week on my teaching. I am teaching the same course that I've taught for a while, so I know it very well. But it is like a little bit of, time that you're not able to do your research, that you have to plan to be able to balance those things.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say, be prepared to teach something that you might not have taught before. So for me and another student in Jim's lab, Sarah Bronner, we ended up having to teach human anatomy Sarah had to do it for her first year, and I had to do it along with her that first semester. And that was incredibly hard because neither of us really had any anatomy experience, but it was what was required. The graduate school and the department needed people to teach this class. And so when you're put in that position, you kind of get a chance to learn something new. I had never dissected a human body before. I'd maybe done rats or, different things in the lab, but never had human cadavers and been responsible for teaching someone about the human body. So it was a learning experience. And then at the end, that's something that can actually shine on my CV of I taught one of the harder classes that you can teach. So it can be challenging, but it can also be rewarding.
Absolutely. Chance, do you want to tell us anything you wish you'd known?
Yeah, I think that you brought up a good point earlier about the differences between undergrad and graduate school, and that it's definitely important to understand that graduate school requires a different skill set, and you still have to take courses, and you can lean on the knowledge you gained as an undergraduate to help you with those courses, but you also need to be independent, like was mentioned, and you need to understand that no matter how busy you are, it's important to keep your thesis and your research moving forward. I think that especially in my master's, it was easy to kind of get caught up in the teaching and the class load, and it's easy to essentially set some of the other things aside. And I think one of the most important things is just making sure that you're always moving forward. A lot of times they say that you should just always be doing something. Like there might be certain things that you don't want to do, so just try to move to something else and just always move forward, because working on the time scale of 2 to 7 years is nothing like anything I had done before graduate school. And so it's hard to really understand where you're going and to get a good appreciation for what that takes. And then along those same lines, I think that the writing a master's thesis was also very challenging. Nothing in my undergrad had prepared me for what was going to be required to write a thorough literature review and to organize my methods and my results, and then to be able to discuss that. And so it's not something that you should be scared of, but it's something that you should be aware of. It is going to take a significant amount of your time, and it will require that you build some new habits and skill sets that you don't already have.
Yeah, those are great points. So, okay.
A question about narrowing down your field of interest. Mm-hmm. My biggest advice would go to like UT's EEB department faculty and just read through some of their bios or their research things or ongoing projects that they have. And if something grabs you, shoot them an email. Say, hey, do you need a lab assistant? Even if it's a volunteer, dip your toe in. If you haven't had lab experience before, just getting that foot in the door can be a really critical first step. Like it was for me, even though I, ended up doing nothing related to songbird analysis, I wouldn't have been able to proceed in getting another opportunity if I didn't have that first one. And so find something that just, even if you've never done anything with it before, if it looks interesting, take a shot, go for it. Because if anything, it's experience. learned one way or another.
I would second Nate's advice. Firsthand experience is always the best. I know that obviously right now during COVID, kind of field opportunities are probably limited, but I still am seeing postings on Ecolog and some of the job boards for kind of like summer technician work and stuff like that. And all of those, so I had 3 essentially technician experiences before I started grad school. One of them was a year, but then the other 2 were much less than that. And they really helped me figure out just if I was interested in the work that I was doing, and then also the kind of learning from the grad students that were already working in that field. So on those job boards that Jen posted on that previous slide, that's a really good way to figure out what you're interested in. Just getting that firsthand experience of, do I like this field work? Am I interested in the questions that these people are asking? Like, when you're a technician, you end up doing some really kind of like mundane, monotonous stuff sometimes. Like for one of my technician positions, I was essentially like microwaving leaves and needles so that they could and then I would like grind them up so then someone else more senior than me could analyze them. And like, it was pretty boring, but I also like met people through there that were doing work that I thought was interesting, like having those conversations with them. So definitely just getting experience in like, whether that's working in a lab here. I mean, a lot of graduate students would love to have extra hands to help them with their fieldwork or data collection. And if you just say, hey, I don't really know much about the system, but I'm interested to learn. Are you looking for a lab assistant? That's a great way. For the job boards, it's also a really good way to just kind of, like Nate said, just get your foot in the door and get your feet wet.
Yeah, and I would say, as cheesy as it sounds, like you should just follow your heart. If you hear about any type of research that, grabs your attention or that you think would be awesome, if you want to travel, if you want to, discover new organisms, there's still plenty of that to be done. And I think that you have to have the initiative to go read about these things or to hear about them some way. But I think in the end, if you're not really passionate about what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult to get through graduate school.
So what's your guys' life on a daily basis? What's a day look like for you as a graduate student?
My day now, I, like almost all of us, working from home. So I'm kind of towards the later parts of my PhD. So my days are mostly involving writing. I do a lot of writing because I'm working on writing up manuscripts. But I'm also doing data analysis. So I spend a lot of time at the computer right now, which can be a little tedious sometimes, but I have a once a week meeting with Jen, who's my advisor, kind of go over updates of what's been going on, what am I struggling with, what am I thinking about. And then we have a weekly lab meeting every Friday, so I do that. And then on Mondays, I do my teaching. So pretty much my whole Monday essentially is focused on teaching.
Like Kendall, a lot of time spent on my computer, only because I couldn't get into the lab over the summer to really do any new research. But now that that's starting up, I have time set aside throughout the week that I do research. So I'm starting a new research project looking at snails. So I have to extract DNA from like 2,500 snails. So that'll be a lot of my time. Writing manuscripts, writing fellowship applications for funding to do more research is a big time, and spending time identifying those funding opportunities. Obviously teaching, so I have to have set aside time for grading, and pretty much checking your email constantly nowadays is very important. Being in touch, like that's pretty much how me and my advisor stay in touch. It's just constant streams of emails. And so knowing what he needs from me, being able to kind of set aside some time to do that, pretty much is how I spend my days.
Yeah, and then me being in the beginning of my program, I'm, like we talked about, focusing on my teaching responsibilities regularly, focusing on my class responsibilities. And then because my advisor is essentially letting me choose and direct my own research with his help, then I'm spending a lot of time reading research papers and starting to build a base of knowledge to hopefully work toward, designing my own project. And so I'm not really writing yet or doing any hard research at the moment, but just trying to understand the systems I'm interested in and trying to formulate some of the questions that will eventually build my dissertation.
I would add that during the summers, because we're in an ecology and evolutionary biology department, that's typically people's really heavy field season. So that's a lot of time where planning when you're going to go into the field, what you need to go into the field, how you're going to do that, who's going to help you, setting up field sites, figuring out all the logistics for that. So some of my work is in the Smokies, so I'd spend some time hiking in the Smokies to collect soil. When I'm doing actual experiments, then I would have like many hours in the greenhouse during the summer setting up that experiment, measuring stuff. So there's a pretty big diversity of things that you do, kind of depend on the season, but also just depend on the stage that you're at in your graduate career.
Okay, any other questions or things folks want to add? Well, feel free to send any follow-up questions or emails that you have, and we're happy to address those things. And thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for the grad students who participated. This is it's always helpful and incredibly helpful to hear from you all, and I'm really grateful that you made the time. Yeah, Kendall's put her email in, and I'll be emailing everyone. I'll CC everyone on so that everyone has everyone's emails. So I'll send out some other information and this PowerPoint, and then so you can revisit some of these things if you'd like to have another listen. So thank you again, everybody, and holler if you have any other further questions. So, thanks so much.
Thanks for hosting this, Jen.
Thanks. See you later.